So welcome everybody to today's Knowledge Bites webinar. Knowledge Bites is a feature of the Southern Vermont Economy Project. Although we're based out of Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, of course, we do serve both Bennington and Windham regions by providing technical assistance, tools, and resources to all our community projects, municipal or otherwise, that make our community in our region just more economically successful. So these Knowledge Bites webinars are designed to be quick, timely, just sharing resources that you can use right now or for the future. And so today we're just going to make a great connection with the Vermont Bond Bank, Vermont Bond Agency. We have Ken Linge here to present to us. Now we are recording this. We archive all of these afterwards. So you can share this with other people in your community and it becomes a resource for the ages. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Ken and thank him for coming here today.
Great. Thanks, Meg. Thanks for hosting me, and also thank you for taking the time. Those of you who have joined today and those of you who will be watching this recording in the future, thanks for taking the time to lean into the bond bank and learn about what we do. And also you're presumably coming here because you're community leaders of various kinds. And so thank you sort of on behalf of states, a state organization that's dedicated to helping develop healthy communities that thank you for all the work you do on behalf of your communities as well. So I guess it looks like you have my slide deck up, Meg. So I guess you can go to the next slide. And there's not a way for me to control it, I guess, right? Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I'll just keep it just simpler. I have it all up,
okay.
so you could just say next slide and I'll like pop through it. Yeah, we're pretty informal, so it's easy going.
Thanks. So maybe just a little bit about me. So I am the loan officer at the bond bank. There are only 3 of us on the team, so you're looking at 1/3 of the staff. Our staff is Michael Gahn, who's the executive director, Elizabeth King, who's the controller, and myself. I'm the loan officer, which means that I'm the person to talk to if you're looking for funding for your community. So prior to coming to the bond bank, I had been a library director for almost a decade in Orange County, Vermont. And really just came to recognize the important role that community facilities play, and also came to learn about the challenges funding community facilities. And so I went to business school, learned more about economics and finance and all those kinds of things to sort of improve my ability to help communities find the resources they need to do cool things and develop in healthy ways. And done some other things since, but eventually found my way to the bond bank, where I get to fund community facilities and community infrastructure development. So that's sort of a little bit about me, and I really do love the opportunity to work with communities to sort of custom design approaches to funding initiatives over time. So I'm always happy to hear about what you have in mind, what you want to do, and happy to come up with some strategies for helping you get there. So at a glance, the Vermont Bond Bank was established in 1970 as an instrumentality exercising public and essential government functions. And what that means is we serve governmental units around the state, cities, towns, school districts, fire districts, municipal utilities, et cetera. And our 2 main programs are the Pooled Loan Program and the SRF program, the State Revolving Fund program that we administer with DEC. And you'll see here we have nearly $600 million in loans outstanding in the Pooled Loan Program, and over $230 million in the SRF program. Next slide, please. So we are very mission driven. We work on behalf of Vermont communities to assist public bodies access affordable capital. Usually that means low cost capital over the long term. but it can also mean, like right now, in terms of flood recovery, getting liquidity to meet immediate needs, and in anticipation of, in this case, FEMA dollars down the road. But our vision is bigger than just providing funding. Our vision is really to help community leaders and municipal public bodies plan well and make good decisions over the long term. Next slide, please. So we kind of exist, the bond bank exists kind of in the middle between the funding streams, public marketplace generally, and municipalities. So this maybe looks complicated, but on the left side basically are funding streams. So we leverage individual investors and institutional investors, as well as some state funds, and more so moving forward, probably federal funds as well, to provide loans, and in some cases subsidized loans to towns, school districts, et cetera. So we facilitate that financing and provide a way for municipalities to access the marketplace, the bond market in particular. Next slide, please. So our history is so we were the first bond bank in the country. There are several in states around the country, especially rural states, but we were the first one. We were established in 1970. You probably know of schools in your communities that were built in the late 60s, early 70s. There's a lot of school construction then, and there weren't good opportunities for long-term financing for those schools. And so we were created to do that, to issue bonds to fund that school construction. Fast forward 50 years, we are our portfolio is actually over half other municipal infrastructure. So you'll see that pie chart there shows that only a third of our portfolio is now is school funding. I'm expecting that'll change moving forward, and that because there is probably I think it's fair to say a big school construction need around the state. A lot of those schools built in the late 60s, early 70s have deferred maintenance for many years and are in need of some serious renovations. So we may be sort of coming back to where we started in terms of our portfolio and our activities moving forward. Next slide, please. So this slide is meant to show sort of the three main public lenders for Vermont infrastructure. The green at the top of those bars is USDA RD, Rural Development. And then the dark blue is us, is our pooled loan program. And the light blue at the bottom is the SRF program, which we manage the financial side of in cooperation with DEC. So the USDA RD funding, we work closely with the team there, and it can be a really great source of funding. The Winooski School was an example where they kind of hit a home run with getting some USDA RD dollars. There is, however, a limitation on how much money is available. There's a that's a finite funding stream, and so we have essentially unlimited access to unlimited funds, right? Whatever the bond market will bear, and they it bears trillions. So so there are a variety of sources, and we work together to make projects work. Next slide, please. So I took a look at Southern Vermont. So I was speaking to Southern Vermonters today, and just to give you a sense of what kinds of loans we have been making in Southern Vermont. Right now, looks like $42.5 million loans outstanding in our pooled loan program in Windham County. And you'll see, Windsor County, $69 million, and, Rutland County, $44.5 million, and Bennington County, there are $22 million in loans outstanding. And currently, like in our we're pricing on bonds next week, and there are bonds in that, there are loans in that bond pool to Windsor, Rutland, Manchester. I've been speaking with Brattleboro about a project there that involves the ice rink and some other things. It's not in this pool, but probably in the near future. And I will say that I'm excited to do that project because I regularly stop at the park in Brattleboro with my kids when I'm traveling through, and my kids need to squirm. And there's that great park with the pool and the ice rink and the ski tow and all that stuff. And so anyway, I love that park. Anyway, next slide, please. So yeah, for 50 years, we've been assisting Vermont communities. That's really just, how we think of ourselves. When my daughter, who's 5.5, asks, what I do, and I sort of try to put it in a nutshell for her and say, I provide funding for communities. She says, "Oh, you're a community helper." She's learning about community helpers, I guess, in school. And so, but yes, that's how we think of ourselves, and so I think of myself. So, and we fund all types of physical infrastructure. So, it's what's important to us is that our project is approved by voters, and that it's, and that there is a plan in place to meet the debt service. And we are generally agnostic about, what that infrastructure is, whether it's for a pool or for a culvert or whatever it is. Let's see. So, and we're constantly exploring new approaches to providing capital, right? The financial marketplace is a place where innovation is constantly happening. We were innovative in 1970 when we organized, and we are continuing to track opportunities for innovation, and we're trying to stay on the ahead of the curve nationally, so that the Vermont communities are getting the best access to capital they can. And we've been to that end, we've been tracking our impact very closely, and have been issuing local investment bonds that report on impact, and that make relatively low cost bonds available for local investors. And more about some innovations in slides ahead. Next slide, please.
Sure. Can I just ask a quick question? Yeah. Is SRF the revolving loan fund, or when you say that?
Yeah, sorry. SRF is the state revolving fund program that we manage in partnership with DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation. It's water, wastewater, and stormwater loans. And I have a slide later to sort of compare that to the pool loan program. But the gist is that to apply for that program, you go to DEC and apply through through either their drinking water program or their clean water program and you get essentially in the prioritization queue, and work with, on the engineering side with them to figure out what the appropriate project is and all that stuff. And then we do the financial administration of that program. And so we underwrite those loans. And so we work with you to establish debt service coverage capability, and help folks figure out how to finance those projects over time. So is that, and we'll come back to that some more. So just to give you a sense of some of the kinds of impact that we have and that we track in 2022, here are some numbers. We 102,000 Vermonters were impacted by our projects. 4,000 student seats were enhanced. Like I said, we do a lot of school construction funding, and 508,000 square feet of public facilities were upgraded, and the 200 megawatt hours of number is about renewable energy that is created by is produced by projects that we funded. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. So like I said, we won, I think I mentioned this, the Deal of the Year award in 2019 from the Bond Buyer, which is the kind of the industry, is the buy side sort of industry leader. And, this was exciting Vermont is a pretty small player in the national bond market, but national bond market is huge, and there are Los Angeles will issue a bond for it's airport development that's just massive in scale, right? And so but I feel like we sort of punch above our weight in terms of getting recognized for doing interesting things, and so it was exciting for us to get the Deal of the Year award as for a small issuer anyway. That was for impact reporting, and for the low cost of entrance for investors, so that local folks can invest in their communities. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we do, one of the tools that we bring to the table is is our credit rating. The only other public entity in the state that has a credit rating is the city of Burlington, and I don't even think they've really used it quite for a couple of years. But we issue bonds at least twice a year, and maintain a ratings with Standard & Poor's and Moody's of AA+ and AA2 respectively. Next slide, please. And so that enables us to pass along that low cost of credit to our borrowers. It's a signal to the bond market that that risk is relatively low, and so we track obviously what's happening on the bond market constantly, and here are some charts to kind of give you a sense of where the bond market is today and where it's been. The top left chart shows where municipal tax exempt bond yields have been over the course of the past 12 months. It's been an interesting interest rate environment in the past couple of years, past year especially. It's funny though, because people see like what mortgage rates are, might be like 7% or whatever, and people get really sort of nervous. And the general, the municipal bond market the swings tend to be less wild, more moderate than in other parts of the market. Risk tends to be relatively low, and that's primarily why towns can't just like close, right? And the sorts of things that get funded with bonds tend to be essential needs. So folks, investors have some confidence that those will be funded, and also there's no, I shouldn't say no, there's some elasticity of willingness to pay, right? Municipalities can't just say, they can raise taxes, right, to cover costs if need be. Hopefully not too much, not out of whack with the benefit they're getting. But so anyway, that's all to say that we track closely what's happening in the bond market, and our cost of capital gets passed on pretty much directly to our borrowers. And this is where rates are basically now, they fluctuate all the time. We're pricing next week. We'll have an exact number for what the bond bank is able to issue for in a week or so. But they'll probably be around these numbers, a little under 3% for 10 years, a little under 4% for 20 years, and just a little over 4% on 30-year bonds. The daily yield curve in the bottom, is that yield. You see the inversion at the beginning of that curve. That's where it drops down before it then goes up again. That's indicative of a strange interest rate environment. Ordinarily, you would expect that yield curve to start at its lowest point on the furthest left and then increase steadily to the right as the over time. You expect interest rates to be, higher further out than short-term rates. But in this case, there is a bit of an inversion. Generally, that's because when in a fluctuating interest rate, in a rising interest rate environment, short-term rates are affected more than longer-term rates. So they've gone up, but when I just did my most recent analysis, it was interesting to note that the short-term rate actually came down a touch. So, what that means in time, can't ever say for sure, but we'll see. We don't expect major wild changes in long-term rates in the next year. Next slide, please. So in investing, obviously, is the other side of the coin from what we do. We make loans, and then we also encourage investors to invest in our bonds. It is certainly, personally, before, so most immediately before I came to the bond bank, I was working on policy nationally to promote better opportunities for local investment, and for retail investors in particular, for people who don't have millions of dollars but want to invest in their communities. And that's one of the reasons I came to the bond bank, is because I see it as a great tool for that. We of course invest through our tax dollars in our communities, but there are other ways too to provide that capital for our communities to do the cool things that we hope they'll do: build libraries, build schools, build pools, those kinds of things. So on our website, there are opportunities to invest. You don't buy directly from us, but people need to go through a broker. But there's information about our offerings here. Okay, next slide, please. So one thing we do, like I said, our mission is to provide essentially affordable capital, but our vision is to help community leaders be thoughtful about investing in their community investment over time, right? And so we've been hosting the past couple of years the Vermont Capital Planning Forum, and we will continue to do so. And it's an opportunity for community leaders to come together who work on various aspects of community development, and funders to come together to talk about funding mechanisms, to basically build a kind of to build more of a knowledge base around the state, and to promote best practices for capital planning, so that we are all being proactive about how we develop our communities, how we invest in our communities. There are a lot of aspects to capital planning. And one of the things that we're thinking more and more about is climate change and severe weather events, and how to plan in a way that recognizes those risks and uses plans in a smart way to was that where were we? Okay, yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. So One of the aspects of incorporating climate in planning is using good tools and good data. There are, as you may be aware, the state is putting out some did this assessment with UVM a couple of years ago. That was pretty interesting. They, of course, the state also has a climate action plan and a state hazard mitigation plan, and all communities should have these things of their own. So most are working on developing them. Certainly, regional planning commissions are great partners in developing these kinds of things and in planning in general. Next slide, please. So I keep mentioning pools, maybe just because it's going to be like 88 degrees or something here in today. But everyone thinks, often you hear about, planning for climate change and severe weather events. You get, it's kind of a downer. You think about, disaster and think about risk mitigation. And yes, that's an important part of it. And here's some examples of projects we funded that include like, an electric substation upgrade in Stowe to improve resilience and reliability during storms in the mountains there that could knock out power from one direction, so they would have another source of power. And here's an example of an energy project in the Bennington elementary schools that generated a lot of savings in terms of financial savings and environmental emissions reductions, those kinds of things. And that's often where people's minds go when they think about climate and planning. But it's also you can also think about, okay, we're gonna have hotter summers. Maybe our lake isn't going to be maybe as reliably clean, et cetera. I think, oh, well, what can we do? And if you're planning well and you're being proactive and you're thinking broadly about all the things, then maybe you think, oh, we should maybe bring back this old pool that had fallen into disrepair, and we can invest in it and have our community can prosper in this kind of good way through our smart planning and our appropriate financing of that resource. And so, yeah. Okay, next slide, please. There's a credit element, of course, to weather events, to disaster. There are places like Paradise, California, which was destroyed by the fires last year, and there are some communities in places like Florida where there's hurricane risk that are seeing some pressure on given the risk on their credit. And so we think about this with the buy side is what investors are thinking about these things, because the more risk they view in the potential investment, the higher the price will be, and the higher the cost will be to our borrowers. And S&P and other rating agencies are obviously looking at when there's a big event like the recent flooding, they look at what has happened and how that what they should be thinking in terms of their rating, and by their rating, it's really their rating of us is what it comes down to. And so we've been in touch with folks in the bond market and to assure them that we are in okay shape, and that and so that to bring this back to planning, that communities are planning appropriately for future events. Next slide, please. Thanks. So yeah, one aspect of the kind of innovations that we've been doing that we're excited about right now, and that there's just an opportunity for, is in the sort of energy and efficiency, the energy and sort of generally the energy space. there are programs like the Inflation Reduction Act has in it a thing called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and you may have heard news about there's a launch of a part of that program called the Solar for All program that was held in Vermont. I guess a month back or so, and there are a couple of other programs within that Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund program that we have been tracking from the beginning, looking for ways to access federal funding to essentially subsidize loans for energy projects in the state for our borrowers. And there's another program. You're going to be among the first to hear about this one, because it's sort of just in the process of becoming official, not quite fully official, but official enough that I think I can share some news about it. There's a program called the RESP program, Rural Energy Savings Program, through USDA, Rural Utility Commission. So not RD, not rural development, but that makes funding available for projects, energy efficiency projects, and projects that reduce essentially the energy burden to communities. So energy, when there are both energy savings and cost savings over time, those are the kinds of projects that funding is geared for. And so we are expecting to receive a $40 million capitalization grant from them to subsidize loans that do those things, that that generate solar power, that that will over time bring down energy cost. Obviously, there's an upfront cost for a lot of energy efficiency programs that makes it hard to from a cash flow perspective to make those work sometimes, or historically has been. And so we're always thinking about those kinds of things. How can communities be better off in the long term through near-term financing? And in this case, I was going to say short-term, but even it could be relatively long-term financing. But in the life of the project, given the life of the project, the life of the asset, more to come about that stuff. Okay, next slide, please. So, but back to our sort of bread and butter, the pooled loan program, which is really our main program, is pretty broad. We can fund just about any type of infrastructure and for any type of governmental institution. The state revolving fund program is more specific for water, wastewater, stormwater, and DEC manages the application process, and we manage the financing. Next slide, please. So here's some of the requirements and terms for our pooled loan program. Sorry, the text is pretty small, but all of this is available on our website. The main thing we need is to see evidence of voter approval and authority, and that comes to us through a letter of opinion from a local bond council. We keep an approved list of bond councils on our website. Best thing to do if you're wondering about that process is to look at our website or call me or email me and say, how do I go about getting that approval? It can be a long process if you don't know. And so best to start with that early and talk to a bond counsel early in the process so that you can, warn meetings with the appropriate advance notice, those kinds of things. And we do require an audit for the pooled loan program. Ideally, we'd love to see 3 years of audits and at least 3 years of financials, but 1 year audited is required. And then, the sort of one sort of general rule about, really it should, all borrowing is this way, but certainly it's the case for the pooled loan program, that the useful life and the financing must align. So, that means that if, vehicles, about vehicles, I'm sure that have limit, generally don't last for 30 years and can't get a 30-year loan. But, it's funny in the wastewater world how, different components can have different useful lives, and that gets kind of interesting. But, pipes, for instance, last for a long time, whereas like pumps, maybe not so much. But payment dates and are twice a year for the pooled loan program. Interest only payments in May, and then interest and principal payments are due on November 1st. And we do a full credit review and underwriting process, but I like to think anyway that the application is pretty straightforward. It doesn't require too heavy of a lift, and that we reach out to folks for sort of information as we need it. Okay, next slide, please. So we organize 2 pools annually. I keep calling this a pooled loan program. Just to back up a second, in case folks are confused about what that means. We, twice a year we issue a bond, and we use the proceeds from that bond to fund loans to communities around the state. So right now, I think there are 11 loans in our summer pool, and it basically creates an economy of scale for Vermont communities, brings down the cost. The cost of issuance is spread over 11 communities. And we do pools twice a year, once in the winter and once in the summer. The idea is that the winter one captures, makes funding available to communities that got authorization in a November vote. And the summer pool makes funding available to communities that got essentially voter authorization at town meeting. So, but the most important thing to do in terms of timing probably is to align the funding need with the date of funding. So you don't want to get money too soon and be paying interest on it prior, too far in advance of when you need to pay contractors. And on the flip side, it's better to have the funding available when you need it right away. And there are ways to get a bond anticipation note in advance of our being able to fund your bond. There's some cost to that. It's still worth doing in many cases, but especially if there's if it's a very big project and you want to fund just some of it with a bond anticipation note, that can make sense. But so we every time an application in preparation for each pool, I host a webinar for folks to walk them through the application process. So applications for the summer pool are generally due in May and mid-May. And so in late April or early May, I'll host a webinar. And for the next pool, the winter pool, the applications will probably be due in late December. And I will likely host a webinar in late November, early December, something like that. To walk folks through the process. The process is the applications are available online. You can create an account and open an application anytime and get started on it. And it's not official until you hit submit. So you can just sort of play with it and see what's required there. And as questions come up, reach out, those kinds of things. We're happy to walk folks through that process. Next slide, please. So one thing I regularly do for folks is provide a preliminary illustrative schedule of what debt service would look like for a loan. And I encourage folks who have been through this process before are quick to just send me an email saying, hey, what would it look like if I wanted to borrow $4.1 million in the, here, I guess in this example would be in, next winter's pool, which would be funded in, here I used a date of March 6th. It wouldn't be exactly March 6th, but somewhere around there. Actually, it would probably be late February most of the time. But what would the interest rate look like on that? And what would the debt service look like over time? If it's a GO bond, a general obligation bond of a taxing authority, of a governmental unit, then the schedule has to be built on level principal payments with declining interest. It's a little different than folks are often used to with mortgages and things that are level debt service. We can do level debt service in some limited contexts, but generally this is how we do most of our loans. And in this schedule, you'll see that the debt service, there's the debt service schedule in the middle, and then the annual debt service schedule on the right. That just is the right columns are just annualizing the debt service payments. So whereas in that middle section there, they show the May interest only payment and then the November principal payment. And they sort of combine them on the right. Next slide, please. So another thing we do is helping folks help folks figure out, sort of answer that question of like, how much debt should we get? We get that regularly. Municipalities aren't really like people in that they don't tend to have sort of fixed income restrictions. So when you go to a bank for a mortgage, they say, well, what's your income, and what are your assets, and you can tell them that stuff, and then they can figure out what you can be pre-approved for, right? And there's some pretty hard and fast rules about that. With a municipality, there's some flexibility. I referred to this earlier. I think in taxing. So if people in the community really want something, they can approve it, and they can pledge to fund it over time. And we recognize that your a community's past tax revenue doesn't necessarily shouldn't, if it's limited, it shouldn't necessarily limit future borrowing capability. So what we do is we look at ratios and see how they compare to other communities in the state. Of course, we have data, and we maintain data on what communities around the state are borrowing, and what their operations are like, what their revenues and expenses are like. And we look at national data as well. Moody's publishes some data on different kinds of communities and what kinds of ratios they use. And just sort of anecdotally, I'll say that probably not surprised to most folks that our Vermont communities tend to be thrifty, and we tend to not overspend, and so by and large, most of the time there is some more debt capacity than is fully realized, and so there is some opportunity there. It's not to say though that we don't see communities sometimes with bigger appetite than they're necessarily ready for. But then again, what we also tell communities is that you can exceed certain ratios in the near term. You can have high debt service for some period of time, if needed to fund an important project. As long as over the long term, there's a plan to kind of rein that in and address that debt service, to bring that back into sort of a more safe, less stressed range, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. And so that's just to say that, like those schedules, I'm happy to do those benchmarking analyses for communities. I should say, as capacity allows. Those sometimes they say, oh yeah, when I get a chance, I'll do a benchmarking analysis for your community. Right now, we're quite busy with flood response stuff, as is everybody, trying to figure out liquidity challenges, and so meet people's liquidity challenges in the near term, and figure out long-term strategies too for addressing damage, but also for helping folks wrap their heads around maybe some changes that need to be made as well, because we're all aware, I think, that we always will have infrastructure needs, and there will be changing, and our world is constantly changing. So anyway, adapting to that is requiring some planning. So that's pretty much all I've got. Some contact information here for all of us at the bond bank. Of course, again, my name is Ken Linge. I'm the loan officer, and that's my information right there in the middle at the bottom. Ken@vtbondagency.org is my email address. 802-861-0074 is my phone number. I love to get calls and emails from folks. Like I said, for a while I was working in national policy, in the national policy world, and it was feeling disconnected from from Vermont communities, and came to the bond bank so that I can work directly with folks in communities, helping them figure out and fund their projects. And so I really welcome those emails and those calls anytime.
Thank you so much. I've actually found that really fascinating. I took a lot of notes. We're thinking a lot. Everybody's thinking a lot of, now suddenly we're like, yes, that, those disaster management plans, they should really not be sitting on the shelf. Let's take those hazard mitigation plans and really work with them. So I'm sure that we will be in touch to have you connect with communities again. So I'm thinking we're already planning for our economy summit for next year. And we're really thinking that climate adaptation, of course, is, now it's front and center. Micah or Gary, do you guys have questions that you want answered right away? Or you can always contact Ken directly, but we're happy to take those questions live if you have them.
Well, I got a couple. Ken, what's the average loan amount and kind of duration that you guys are funding typically at this stage?
They vary widely. Loan amounts vary widely. We can do relatively small loans, a couple $100,000 in our pool loan program, and we are prepared to do $100 million plus loans to school districts. Commonly, this pool is a little bit smaller than average. The summer pool is just around $30 million. And that's, a couple of school district loans in the $8 million, $10 million ballpark. And then, some smaller ones, some $3 million ones for some municipalities. And then, including, for some small communities that, there's I think Dorset has one that's like $3 million, something like that. That's, a pretty big project for a small community like that. And then there are others that are quite small. SRF loans are all over the place in terms of cost. There are, small planning loans for $20,000, and then there are $20 million wastewater treatment facility loans that we do for the construction of those projects. We also have, and I should have referenced this earlier, we also have we've developed just this past year a flexible loan program that's sort of meant to create an opportunity for folks sort of outside of those other programs if they need, relatively small loans under, say, $400,000, something like that. We can meet those needs, and especially with the shorter duration. Like that's meant to go up to 8 years, but be really low cost. Under 2% probably. Duration on our pool loan program really can vary. There's one in this current pool for I think it's 7 years for an ambulance. And then there's some 30-year loans for infrastructure that will last for a long time.
Yeah, I was curious if we were eligible for a shorter loan duration, say a 3 to 5 year period as opposed to a 10-year. And maybe getting a little bit lower interest rate as well. For infrastructures, a lot of what we're dealing with are going to be box culverts being installed and getting engineered to do such.
Yeah, there are. We can take advantage of lower rates for shorter term loans. There may be an opportunity too, and we do fund stormwater infrastructure like culverts, both through the pool loan program and through the SRF program. There are opportunities for subsidies in the SRF program that are unique to that program that are worth looking into. The downside is it's a bit of a complicated program that that requires some time in the pipeline. And like I said, culverts just like we fund both ways. We definitely have funded in the pool loan program culvert replacements in recent years. I mean, after Irene certainly, but even in recent years, it was the Halloween storm of 2019. There was the Muddy Brook culvert and stuff up in our area that we funded some of that. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, you have any questions?
Yes. So where the town of Rockingham would be using them for is infrastructure to go along with development projects. So creating new and widened roads and streetscapes with water and sewer service, and probably not thinking of TIF district at all, but just being able to fund the infrastructure to go along with it. And do you advise, or do you recommend we incorporate attorneys in terms of like tying in developer contributions to the either to the debt service or to funding the infrastructure that's servicing those developments?
I'm not sure if I fully understand the question.
So do you have like templates of agreements that you use? Like do you fund that type of thing? So infrastructure to service a new development. And do you have examples of agreements that you have with multiple parties, or do you always just like have an agreement with the municipality or a school district, and everything else would be outside of that, your purview?
We lend, we are limited in terms of we lend to governmental units in the state, so to municipalities, to school districts, and so if they have an agreement with other parties, I certainly think that's possible. We can't lend directly to developers, but This sounds like enough of a nuanced situation that, you know, I would want to know kind of the specifics and this is where bond counsel becomes really useful. So, you know, there are a number of folks around the state, and, you know, like I said, there's an approved list on our website of them who are real experts in this space who can advise you on, because part of it is, you know, what is the municipality's legal you know, opportunity. It's not just us. You know, we can basically lend to municipalities in whatever way. You know, if they're allowed to borrow, we're allowed to lend. Basically, that's the gist of it. You know, we actually there was a statutory change in this past session that increased our authority in this capacity, and so that there's a little bit of an untested authority that we have that I'm not sure exactly how it might be able to be brought to bear on this particular situation, but yeah. So does that sort of answer your question, Gary? Is that, I mean, I think it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I'll look at the list of bond counsel and see if there's anyone that we work with, and maybe approach someone if not.
And if you don't find it on our website, don't hesitate to call me or
Okay.
email me, and I can follow up with.
Great.
Well, we've used up like more than our usual time, but I think this was fascinating. I took a bunch of notes. I think it's really interesting. And I love that we have like an agency like this that is like we can reach out to, and it kind of demystifies this process that seems so complex and daunting. And yet, as you know, municipal officials, normally people are not like professional finance people. And so it's really nice that we have professional finance people at the ready to take our phone call and reach us. And just for, you know, for us knowing kind of the timing is great. You know, I think this was really helpful. I learned a lot. I hope Gary, you and Mike did, and I hope that we'll share this recording and other people will learn a lot. I think this was great. And I look forward to continuing this conversation, because I do feel like climate adaptation, energy resilience is suddenly, we talk about it. And now we're like, you know, we get a wake up call that we're like, yep, the time is actually now, or maybe last week. But you know, I think a lot of communities are ready to move forward. And I think the Vermont Bond Agency is going to be a busy place. So good luck, everybody, with your projects. Ken, thank you so much for coming today. Again, I will post this and I'll share it with everybody immediately. And then you can look for any of these on our Knowledge Bites page at the Brattleboro Development website. And you know, look forward to continuing these conversations. So thank you, everybody, so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Meg.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.